Hi guys, my name is Nicole. Welcome to Listen to the Stars. This is a channel where I talk about astrology, tarot cards, and the cards of truth. I also do a lot of interviews of interesting people, so please subscribe if you're interested in any of those things. And I read astrology charts, tarot cards, and I'm a life coach. If you would like a session with me, then go to NicoleBrenny.com. Today we're going to be talking about the most important sign and house in the zodiac for astrologers. So there are many different things in the birth chart that can show an astrologer, and I'm not going to be talking about all those things. I'm just talking about one little piece of the birth chart that I have noticed, excuse me, to really show astrologers, or to at least be a part of astrologers' charts. So I looked at the birth chart of every single astrologer that I had in my database. Unfortunately, it was only 38 people. So I do realize that that's not quite enough to make, huge statements about or evidence to say a specific thing, but I will be readdressing all of this stuff again once I have more charts. And I thought this would be a great way for you guys to submit any charts of astrologers if you happen to know their data in the comment section. So I think that it's strong enough from what I found now to present it, but please do share any data of any interesting astrologers that I might not have heard of below. And only if they're comfortable with that data being public. So don't send me birth data from people that don't want to share it or anything like that. So yeah, keep this in mind that this is just going to be one of several factors. It's not going to be the only factor that shows an astrologer, but I've seen this in all of the astrologers' charts that it's in 100% of the astrologers' charts, this shows up. So I'm looking at one house and one sign in particular. So before I get into the real technical stuff of what I looked at through all the charts, the house and the sign that were the most important were the sixth house. And in the natural zodiac, the sixth house is Virgo. So Virgo was the most important sign. So a lot of actually sun sign people, sun sign Virgo people end up being astrologers. Not every single one of them, but sun sign Virgo people do make great astrologers. So that was super interesting to me. And so what I looked at in these charts was I looked at important planets, like self factors. So the sun, the ascendant lord, the Atmakaraka. And I looked at those either being in Virgo or in the sixth house. I also looked at nodal placements, Rahu and Ketu in Virgo or the sixth house. Rahu and Ketu, the north and south node of the moon, as some people know them as, they're really these planets that show our karma. So our past karma and our future karma. So really what we are meant to learn, our biggest life lesson we're meant to learn in this lifetime. So I looked at those as well. And I looked at those in the D1, and I also looked at that in the D9. So there are pretty much four criteria. Are there self factors in Virgo in the D1? Are there self factors in the sixth house in D1 or your regular birth chart? For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, just in your regular birth chart. Are there self factors in Virgo in the D9? And the D9 is really a divisional chart. So it's like zooming into your chart. A lot of astrologers will use it as a secondary birth chart. So I don't necessarily always do that, but I thought it would be good to just see if there was anything occurring in the D9. So were there any self factors in Virgo in the D9? Were there any self factors in the sixth house in the D9? And I also included any important planets or the nodes conjunct the sixth cusp. Because in the higher divisional charts, the cusps will be like all conjunct in one house or they move around a lot. So I also did take that into account with the D1. If there was something conjuncting the sixth cusp, if the sixth cusp had moved, then I also paid attention to that. But I also took into account the equal house in that case too. And in 100% of the charts I studied of these astrologers, either the house or the sign or both showed up. So it was a very interesting look at, what makes an astrologer, what sign, what house really makes an astrologer. All right, and the other thing that I wanted to mention was why. In my opinion, And in a lot of astrology books, you'll hear the sixth house rules nature. And Virgo is a very nature-oriented sign. Western astrologers will often relate Virgo to virgin goddesses. One of them is Astraea. She's like the caretaker of humanity. And another is Diana. And Diana is totally related to nature. So she's related to the woods and to deer. And so you're always getting this earthy sort of natural quality when it comes to Virgo. Virgo also relates to the Virgin. And you find that meaning in the Brihat Parsha or Shastra. I lost my page, otherwise I'd read it to you. But so when we think of virgin, we think of, you know, someone being in their natural state before any kind of transformation through pregnancy, right? Or through sexuality. So really it's being in that natural state, in that pure state, you know, your nature. So having Virgo linked to those virgin goddesses also shows that link to nature, because those virgin goddesses are always related to nature. So there's that link. And the sixth house just relates to nature in general. It relates to wild animals. It relates to the woods. It relates to the natural sciences. So wait, why am I talking about nature if I'm talking about astrology? Well, one of the things I learned early on in my study of astrology is that in the beginning, before we were going to astrologers to figure out if so-and-so is cheating on us or whatever, astrologers weren't really like reading personal horoscopes. They were understanding the planetary placements in the sky so that they could better align themselves with those energies to be more in touch with the natural world, so that they could do their different rituals, or they could propitiate the gods at the right time, that they could do their specific ceremony so that the harvest would end up being plentiful. And in order to do that, they had to align themselves with the natural world. And so really astrology was always the study of the natural world and aligning oneself and huge communities and complete whole civilizations with nature. And aligning ourselves with nature is really an act of healing. So when the body is diseased, it's out of line with nature. And this reminds me of something that Nishi and I talked about. He actually said, you know, I think astrologers at their best or at their core are all really healers. And so I love that quote. You can see that video with him. I'll try to link it now, but it's on my channel. But that's true. And the sixth house is the house of healing. So really, at the core, if astrologers are really trying to heal, then they should have something activating their sixth house. All right. And speaking of the sixth house is a house of service. So astrologers are typically serving others or serving humanity in some way. And it's also a house of problems and obstacles. And all you do as an astrologer is deal with other people's problems, issues they're having, difficulties they're having. And especially if you have a nice, strong, malefic influence in your sixth house, you can overcome obstacles and enemies and things like that. So having a nice, strong sixth house factor can really help a person or an astrologer help others deal with issues and problems. So those are all those things. And really to go back to why Virgo is really that nice earthy house, well, it's a fixed earth. So it's really a really strong earth element. And I will kind of explain more about Virgo as we go through some specific chart examples, because I am going to go through specific chart examples. I have, I think, 10 or 11 of them. But really one thing I want to mention about Virgo is it's very grounded. And, you know, astrology is such a spiritual thing. It's the heavens, you know what I mean? But the heavens, when it comes to our lives, they want to be grounded. They want to be practical. They want to be put to use in a real way. The heavens, as like a real thing that you do, can't just remain up there. They need to come down to earth. In the cards of truth, there are 4 different suits. There are the spades, spades, hearts, clubs, and diamonds. And diamonds are actually considered the most spiritual suit, or one of the most spiritual suits. And the reason why is because in order to be spiritual, the most spiritual, to reach the highest you can into the heavens, you need to be grounded. And think about a tree. You know, before there were skyscrapers, trees and mountains were raising themselves up higher than anything else. And trees, they can reach so high because their roots are so deep, and their roots are actually typically just as big as their branches, if not bigger sometimes. So being able to root themselves in the earth, they can actually be spiritual. So Virgo is that beautiful place where that spiritual energy can be grounded and used practically and used to help you overcome obstacles and heal yourself and be of service and all of those things. And I'm sure I'm going to think about a million different sixth house significations and a million different Virgo significations as I go on. And if you are thinking of any, then comment below and share them with me, because this is a place to learn and share. But let's just get right into these astrologers' charts. I want to mention that I have great respect for all the astrologers that I'm sharing the charts of. All of these astrologers' charts were either in my database from Kala software, which I'll be using today, or they were astrology data or birth data that I had found online that they had shared. So I'm not sharing any like personal information of astrologers that I know. These are all the charts of people that have shared their information previously. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen with you. And this is the chart of Joni Patry. She's an amazing astrologer. She has a YouTube channel. She has like 30,000 views on everything she's done. And she is an old school astrologer. She started doing astrology when I started doing tarot, like at the age of 12, and started with Western, then moved to Vedic. So she's like an old school, real deal astrologer. And so remember, we're looking for 4 different things. Virgo in the 6th house, Virgo in the D1, the 6th house in the D1, or your main birth chart. That's what I mean when I say D1. We're also looking for Virgo in the 6th house in the 9th divisional chart, the Navamsha. So those are 4 things that I'm looking for. And most people had 2 or 3 of those things. Some people only had 2, but 100% of the charts had at least one of them. Okay, and I'll show you the breakdowns at the end. I made little charts, so you'll be able to see that. So her chart's super interesting. I'm going to try to stay focused and just show you these factors. Remember, these astrologers are going to have other things in their charts that are going to show that they're an astrologer. I'm just adding one little thing that you can look at besides that. So first we check Virgo. And her ascendant lord, moon, is in Virgo. So there's one point towards this theory. Then we look at the 6th house, and it has Rahu, the north node. So remember I said I was looking at the nodes? So Rahu is what your soul is trying to learn in this lifetime. So it's going to put you in situations where you're going to have to learn how to use it. So she's really growing in the area of the 6th house. She's going to really be driven towards 6th house things. So both of those factors are there. And then in her Navamsha, she has Rahu in Virgo and conjunct the 6th cusp. So there it is again, a lot of strong Virgo 6th house energy. And then her 6th equal house is not anything that we should pay attention to. So a pretty cool chart. Next we have Tracy Marks, and Tracy Marks is a Western astrologer. She's one of my favorite astrologers. I love her. So if we look at her chart, if we look at the sign of Virgo, she has a stellium, 3 or more planets in Virgo. And I believe none of these planets are necessarily a self factor, but when you have a bunch of planets in one house, it becomes more important. And it is an important house already because K2 is there. So K2 being in Virgo or the 6th house can kind of show a past life influence. So she could have studied astrology in a past life, or was, more in line with nature or whatever it was in a past life. And so that also places Rahu in Pisces, which is just showing that she's developing herself spiritually, or whatever, she's developing Piscean qualities. So the 6th house doesn't have anything of note. Virgo has K2 in the Navamsha, so that's very strong again. And the 6th house doesn't have anything of note, but a very strong chart to show that she is really working on that Virgoan 6th house energy in this lifetime. Okay, Alyssa Sharp. So this one was very interesting, and I wanted to share it just because it doesn't totally fit the mold. I mean, it does, but it's a little weaker. Alyssa Sharp is an astrologer whose chart I looked at very in depth in a previous video. So Venus and Mars here are in Virgo. And Virgo, or Venus and Mars there are just showing she has a passion for Virgo stuff. Okay? The sixth house doesn't have anything. So her main chart isn't showing that Virgo energy extremely strong like the other charts, but they're still very important. Or it's still very important. And Venus is dispositing Sun, which is a self factor. And it's also dispositing Rahu, which is an important planet. Okay, it's part of her karma that she's trying to fulfill in this lifetime. So that kind of strengthens it. Then we move to the Navamsha, and she has her South Node Ketu in Virgo. And then she has, let's see, anything else? I think that was it for her chart, but this is pretty nice and strong there to see Ketu in Virgo. All right, now we have Isabel Hickey. She is like a very, very interesting astrologer. This is the craziest, one of the craziest charts I've ever seen, actually. And her sixth house, or let's start with Virgo. Her Virgo, there isn't a self factor there, but this is an extremely strong Virgo because Mercury is exalted there. So it's really like enhancing that energy. I saw this in another chart too, where it wasn't necessarily a self factor, but Mercury was exalted. And Mercury is really important in astrology because there's so much detail-oriented work and research-oriented work that you need that intellectual capacity sometimes to take in that much information and to digest it properly and to use it in a coherent way where you can share it with people. And if we look at her sixth house, she has Ketu there. So again, more of that like past life influence, maybe having done this before previously. In the Navamsha, she has nothing. Well, she has the ascendant lord from her main chart, Mars, in Virgo. And she has the south node in the sixth house. And then she has the ascendant lord of the D9 or Navamsha conjunct the sixth cusp. So a lot of sixth house Virgo energy. Robert Cook. He's an astrologer that I'm less familiar with, but he was a good example as well. Virgo has Sun and Venus. Venus is his Atmakaraka, so his soul signifier, the planet that signifies him, and it's his ascendant lord. Sun is the natural Atmakaraka, and it's also in Virgo, so that's very nice to see. The sixth house doesn't have anything. In the Navamsha, we have Saturn and Venus in the sixth house. In Virgo, and Venus is the ruler of the Navamsha. And then we have Ketu conjunct the sixth cusp. So that was pretty strong as well. All right, Peter Hurkos, he has nothing in Virgo, but Ketu conjunct Jupiter in the sixth house. So another Ketu sixth house situation. And then the Navamsha, he has a stellium of planets, a lot of planets there in Virgo. Very cool to see. And then Rahu in the sixth house. And the sixth cusp has nothing super important there that I can see. So he still has all the factors that we need. Dr. David Frawley is a great example. He has a stellium of planets in Virgo, so a lot of planets there, including Ketu and Sun, the natural Atmakaraka. So you can tell he has a lot of influence there, maybe from a past life. And then the sixth house and sixth cusp don't have anything. The Navamsha has several planets, including the Sun, the self factor, and Ketu in Virgo. And then Venus is very strong in its own house in the sixth house, but it's not super important to what we're trying to look at, and there's nothing with the sixth cusp. But this is a very interesting chart because Virgo is so strong, and Dr. David Frawley has done a lot for astrology. He writes a lot of books that are very popular on the subject, and he also teaches astrology. So he's done a lot for Vedic astrology, and you can really see a strong Virgo. Das Scorvani has a very strong chart for astrology as well, from the factors I'm showing. Virgo has Rahu in it, and that's also the 6th cusp, so that takes care of those two things. And then in the Navamsha, we have Sun and Mercury in Virgo, and Mercury is his Atmakaraka, and Sun is the natural Atmakaraka. And then with the 6th house, we have Saturn and Venus. Venus is the lord of his birth chart, and Saturn is the lord of his Navamsha. And then with the 6th cusp, we don't have anything important to note. Ernst Wilhelm, him and his wife created this software. They've done a lot for astrology. He has K2 in Virgo. Nothing to talk about with the 6th house, but K2 in Virgo, and Virgo is his ascendant, so that's super important too. And then if we look at his D9, he has Rahu. He doesn't have anything in Virgo, but he has Rahu conjunct his 6th cusp, so that kind of strengthens that energy as well. Then we have Linda Goodman. She wrote a lot of very, very popular astrology books. She has nothing in Virgo, and she has just Jupiter in the 6th house, conjunct the 6th cusp, and Jupiter is her Atmakaraka, so the planet that signifies her and her soul. Then in the Navamsha, she has the lord of the Navamsha in Virgo, nothing in the 6th house, and nothing conjunct the 6th cusp. And Edgar Casey, this is an interesting one to talk about. He has K2 in Virgo, so there's that. And then in the 6th house and with the 6th cusp, he has Jupiter and Mars, which isn't super important, except Jupiter disposits this entire sort of stellium of planets here in the 8th house, and the 8th house has a lot to do with the occult. So there's that, you know, link between the 6th house and the 8th house there. And that's something else. So I'm talking more, I'm going into other things, but for those of you that understand that, that is what that's about. And then nothing with Virgo here, nothing with the 6th house or 6th cusp, but the sun is the ruler of his birth chart, and it's in the 6th house here. So that becomes important, and it's also his natural Atmakaraka. And those are all the examples that I had. So I'm going to try to see if I can pull up these charts so that you guys can kind of see more of the technical information that I gathered. I actually tried recording this video 3 times, so I'm like tired and can't talk. Thank you for bearing with me. I'm just looking for these astrologer graphs. Okay, perfect. So what I'm going to show you now is just kind of the breakdown, and these might not be in order, but you know, what are you going to do? And I'm just going to share my desktop, so you're going to see me for a second, but that's okay. Actually, I'm going to make it so you can't see me. And just give me one moment. Whoops. This is the most boring part of the entire video, so I'm glad you're still here. I'm trying to show you these graphs. All right. I wonder if you can see this now. I don't know if you can actually see that, so give me 1 second. Sorry to be so boring. All right, so you can see this. And you can see my desktop, but if you look at this, this is actually the breakdown. So 70% of the astrologers I studied had a prominent 6th house in their main birth chart, and 30% didn't. Then 60% of astrologers had a prominent 6th house in the D9, and 40% didn't. So that's quite a lot. And then astrologers that had there were 62% of astrologers that had a prominent Virgo in their main birth chart, and there were 38% that did not. And finally, 54% of astrologers had a prominent Virgo in the D9, whereas 46 did not. So, I mean, that doesn't seem very like cohesive or that it makes sense, but I think the D1 really spoke to me there with having 60% or 70% of astrologers having that show up, even though 30% didn't. And then the fact that 100% of astrologers studied had at least one of these factors was huge for me. So anyways, I have to go to sleep soon, so I'm going to take off. But if you have more astrologers data that you want to share or a good resource for that, then let me know and I will continue to do this research, and then I will just adjust those pie graphs so that we can see if they go up or if they go down, if this doesn't make any sense. And if you're an astrologer, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, it's kind of been common knowledge that the nodal axis in Pisces and Virgo, or the 1st and 6th house, or 6th and 12th house, excuse me, can make an astrologer, but I actually went out and looked at charts. So let me know what you think. And again, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And I will be back with more videos like this. In the meantime, if you want to book a session with me, look at your chart or read your tarot cards, which I've been doing for 17 years, I'd love to do that. So just go to my website, NicoleBrenny.com, and set something up. So have a good night. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.